Year 7 and 8 then today, and this week we're going to be jam tart making. So jam tarts need short crust pastry, so the real key ingredient or key dish that we're making is the short crust pastry. If you can, the first thing you need to do is preheat your oven. You need it on about 180 degrees, gas mark 5, or if you haven't got fan assisted oven, about 200 degrees. You're going to need a bun tin to be able to cook your jam tarts in. Looks a little bit like this. You don't want a muffin tin, that wouldn't quite work. If for any reason you don't have this type of tin or the cutters that I'm going to show you, you could always use your short crust pastry to do something else. For example, you could take some apples, place them in the bottom of a container, an oven-proof dish, and top it with a short crust pastry. So you've got like an apple pie or some sort of pie, chicken pie, fruit pie. It's your choice. Hopefully you might be able to make the jam tarts. So, to be able to make sure that I can get these filled, you need to find a cutter that is ever so slightly bigger than the circle on your bun tin. So I'm going to take a cutter, and what I'm looking for it to do is to just be ever so slightly bigger than the actual circle. I could use one down, it's a little bit, it still overhangs a little bit, but because my bun tin is quite deep, I'm going to need a little bit extra pastry to go up the side. So I'm going to go for this slightly larger one and see how that works when I cut the first jam tart out, or the first bit of pastry out. So I put that to one side. Now ingredients wise, I'm going to be a bit shorter on this method today because you've done a lot of this. To make short crust pastry, you need a quantity of flour, and whatever quantity of flour you use, you need half the amount of butter or hard margarine, doesn't matter which you use. Soft margarine isn't very good for this one, so you either need block margarine or butter. In the recipe, and what I've done, is 150 grams of plain flour. Okay, plain flour is the best flour that you could use for this. So if I've got 150 grams of plain flour, you should be able to tell me that in there I've got 75 grams of butter or block margarine. I then did exactly what I've done for the scones and the scone-based pizzas. I rolled the butter in the flour, I chopped it up into sticks, and using a knife that I'd used to butter my bread, and I cut each of those sticks of floured butter into tiny cubes, put it into the bowl as I was going, and then I've used my fingertips to make breadcrumbs. Of course I didn't say, and I should have done, and I know you'll have done it already, I have already washed my hands, I have tied my hair back, I've got an apron on, and I did spray my surfaces down before I started. That is important because you'll be rolling out pastry on your surfaces, so if you haven't cleaned your surfaces, do it now. I then rubbed until I got to breadcrumb stage. Now, you are using a lot more fat in this mixture than you've used for your scones. So you will find that this mixture wants to start sticking together or goes yellowy, and also it's warmer weather because we're near summer now. So you need to be very careful to make breadcrumbs and not go too far. So remember, tips your fingers, lift it up, rub it through your finger, between your finger and thumb, and drop it. To check to see if it's all done, you shake the bowl. Now you can see there's a few lumps here that have come to the surface. These might be butter, and if they are, that's fine. You need to keep rubbing those in. But if it's actually where it's all sticking together because it's melted, then you need to stop. So if you can see, my mixture's starting to go a yellowy colour, just ever so slightly. That's why I want to stop. I don't want to melt this butter. Now, in my measuring jug, I've just got some very cold water from the tap. I let my cold tap run for about 10 seconds. The amount at the moment is irrelevant because I'm going to measure some tablespoons of water in. So at the moment, I don't know how much water I've measured out, but I am going to measure it using a tablespoon. So let me get my tablespoon out. I've got my knife that I use to butter my bread as well. And I'm going to start by adding 4 tablespoons of water. That's 60 millilitres. 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to take my knife, and just like when we made scones, rather than using milk, we're using water, but we're going to add the water gradually. What we don't want to happen is to make porridge. It's never good. And so I keep stirring, and can you see how as I'm stirring, with 4 tablespoons of water, that's formed a ball of dough. I haven't got my hands in there, that's just using the knife. So at this stage, I'm going to get rid of the water because I don't need any more. I'm going to take my hand and just bring this together. Now with Our scones, I said to you, this is not a dough, don't need it. With your pastry, it's even more important that you don't need it. And actually, I think 4 tablespoons of water is a little bit much. I'm going to suggest you go to 3.5 tablespoons of water. Start with 3, you can add a little bit more. So I've got a little bit extra flour. You probably won't need, if you're using less water than me, you probably won't need this flour in quite the same way. I'm just going to incorporate that. There we are. And what I want is a dough that won't stick to the surface, particularly when I roll it, but that I could shape without it falling apart. Okay? You're going to put a little bit of flour down on the surface. Now, Year 7s and Year 8s, I've seen other Year 7s and 8s previously, and they like to put lots and lots of flour down. The problem with putting lots and lots of flour down on your surfaces is that you make this too dry. And if your pastry gets too dry, it will crack, and you won't ever be able to get jam tarts out of it. So if I can give you one piece of advice, a little sprinkling of flour under where your pastry is going to sit, and a little sprinkling of flour over the top of your pastry as well, so that the rolling pin doesn't stick. You then take your rolling pin and you go forwards and backwards, a bit like we did for your savoury your scone-based pizza, sorry. After you've gone forwards and backwards, you're going to take your pastry and lift it and do it 1/4 of a turn, either clockwise or anti-clockwise. And as you do that, you'll feel if it's starting to stick, which mine is just there. So I'm going to take a little bit more flour under it. Okay, do my 1/4 of a turn, and a little bit more flour on the top, and I'm going to go forwards and backwards. You're going to carry this out until you get this to about the thickness of a pound coin, and every time you feel it starting to stick, you're just going to put a little bit more flour down, and it literally is just a pinch, and a little bit on top of your pastry if it needs it. Your pastry hopefully won't be as sticky, because if you're starting with 3 tablespoons of water, I think you will have a bit more control on your dough. So I've moved it, and that moved freely. I can feel it moving nicely. So I'm going to not put any more flour underneath, just a little bit on top, because if my rolling pin sticks to my pastry at all, then any bit of pastry stuck on here will lift the pastry every time I roll with that little bit of rolling pin. So backwards and forwards, whoops, until it's just about the thickness of a pound coin, maybe a little bit thinner. I'm then going to take my bun tin, and I'm going to take my cutter. Now if you have got a palette knife, it's like a bladed, a knife with like a non-sharp blade that is flexible, they are useful at this stage. You're going to cut out, just like we did with our, I'm trying to think what we cut out. What did we cut out? Our scones, didn't we? We're not going to twist it, we're just going to push down. And then to help you lift it, you can get your palette knife if it doesn't want to lift easily, and just run it underneath, and it should then lift up. And you're going to lay this into your into your bun tin. Now I can see that this pastry is overhanging a lot on the edges, so I'm going to go down a size and use the next one down, because I said I wasn't sure. I'll see how I get on. So I'm going to do the same again, and we'll see if we can get one that looks about right. And I'm just very gently using the tip of my finger, just gently pushing it down, but I'm not pressing down with any weight, I'm just easing the pastry in. That's better, so the pastry isn't overhanging the edges of the tin. Now because in the oven things cook from the outside in, and we're not sure how many jam tarts this will make, we're going to start by filling up the outside rings of the tin. Okay. And I'm going to carry on cutting these out. When I get to a stage where I can't cut any more out because I've not got the space, I'm going to bring the pastry back together and re-roll it till it's the same thickness again. Okay, so I've managed to get 9 so far. I'm going to bring this back together. I'm going to loose the slightly larger cutter because I know that's too big. Bring it together. Again, just a little bit of flour because by now we've already got some flour incorporated when we rolled it last time. So backwards and forwards, quarter of a turn, make sure it's not sticking, backwards and forwards, quarter of a turn, backwards and forwards, and then I'm going to just cut these out here, and they're just going to slide in there. I think we're going to have enough for 12 plus a little bit extra, so if you wanted to you could use those last few up to make some more once this batch is out. Okay. Now, next ingredient you need, I'm going to quickly rinse my fingers off, they're sticky. Next ingredient is your jam. Now it could be that you want to use jam, that's absolutely fine, any flavour of jam should be fine, or it might be that you want to use some sort of curd, okay, like lemon curd. Now, either way, doesn't matter, you need about half a jar of jam or half a jar of lemon curd, okay? My jar of jam, there's not a lot left in, but you're going to take a teaspoon, so the spoon that you'd use to stir a cup of tea, and you're going to put a teaspoon of the jam into your jam tarts. You want it to be a rounded teaspoon, but it does depend how deep your tin is, so because my tin is a little bit deeper, I'm going to just add a tiny bit more. I'm going to use a second spoon just to knock that off into the case. Now, you're going to look at that and you're going to imagine, and I know you are, the jam tarts that you buy in the supermarket at the bakery counter, where the jam is literally right up to the very top of the pastry. I don't know how they make that happen, but can I say to you, if you put more jam in than a rounded teaspoon, when they go into the oven, generally, the sugar will start dissolving and bubbling up as it gets hot. As it bubbles up, it goes up and over the edges. As it goes up and over the edges, it goes underneath your pastry, and between your pastry and your tin. The problem with that is you can't then get your jam tart out of the tin because it gets stuck because of the jam. So my top tip to you is don't be tempted to put more than a teaspoon of jam, around a teaspoon of jam in. And if you've got a tin which is even shallower than these, then you need to use a little bit less. Now, I don't have jam, however, I have got some homemade lemon curd that I made yesterday, strangely, not for this but for a different reason. So I'm going to use a rounded teaspoon of lemon curd in these other ones. But either is fine. You can obviously, if you've got jam in, you can use jam in all of them, that's absolutely fine. Try and get the jam in the middle, try not to get the jam around the edges. Okay. You will thank me for this later, I promise, because you'll be the one clearing the tin up and it isn't a nice job. Yeah. This jam, lemon curd set a little bit solid actually, there we go. It's been in the fridge, which makes it get more set as well. Then we're going to put these into the oven. You remember how to put things in the oven safely. You need at this stage to either have your parent or carer to do this for you, or you need to ask them for your help. The person that's going to put these into the oven is going to have oven gloves on. Someone else is going to open and hold the oven door open for the other person. You're going to count to 3, whoever's putting it into the oven, to allow that hot air from the oven to escape so that you don't get a face full of hot air and burn you in the face. And then you're going to close the oven door. These should take between 15 to 20 minutes to cook. I will put a time on the recipe that's in your lesson PowerPoint for you, and I will let you know how long these have gone into the oven for. I know that this doesn't look like an awful lot of jam or lemon curd gone on here, But I'm going to show you when these come out, because I guarantee there will be at least one that has overflowed and gone over the side. Please believe me, please put these in the oven without adding any more jam or curd to them, and I will show you what these look like when they come out. So the jam tarts, or my lemon curd tarts, have been in the oven for about 15 minutes. I had a little look. The pastry wasn't quite ready, so I gave them another 3 minutes. They've had 18 minutes at 180 degrees in a fan oven. Now, you're going to be looking at the lemon curd ones, you're going to say they don't look very good, and they look a bit unusual. If you use lemon curd that you bought in a jar from a supermarket, it wouldn't look like this, but because the lemon curd that I made was thickened with eggs, as these have cooked in the oven, the eggs have cooked and gone a very golden brown colour and gone up and over the top. Now, you've noticed here that the jam tart that I made, the jam has actually risen in the jam tart. One very important thing to say is I took these out the oven. I was wearing oven gloves. Obviously the oven door was opened, I counted to 3, waited for the hot air to escape, and I put these down on a heat-proof mat or a cooling rack. I am not going to touch the centre of any of these, although it's very tempting. Jam can get to about 200 degrees plus, even hotter than that. If you touched it, it sticks to your finger or wherever you touch, and it will burn, and because it's sticky, it will stick on there and you won't be able to even get it off, so the burn will be nasty. So you must make sure when these come out the oven you don't touch them. Now the baking tray is still hot. I know these are cooked because if I look underneath one of these, and I'm going to lift these a little bit so you can see, but I don't want you to be touching the pastry like this. If you look underneath, the pastry is cooked all the way through. It's a little bit brown on the bottom, and around the edges it's just starting to go a golden brown colour. If the pastry on the bottom, and this is where you probably want to ask a parent or carer to do this bit, is still soggy, then you need to put them back in the oven. So once they come out, if yours have gone over the edge like this with the jam, lemon curd shouldn't be such an issue. I need you to take them out at this stage. So having one hand in my oven glove and holding the tray with the oven glove, I'm going to go around the edges with a spoon and lift these out. I'm careful not to damage the jam tart. I'm kind of running the spoon around the edges, but that helps before the sugar goes hard to get these jam or lemon curd tarts out, and I can already feel the sugar in there starting to stick. So if you leave it too long, the jam tarts will stick to the tin. So out these come. Okay. Being very careful because it's tempting to use your finger to help move these, but you could burn yourself, so please resist that temptation. Okay. These do smell fantastic. I know they look very golden brown, these lemon curd tarts, but they do smell really lovely and lemony. So these shouldn't be too much of a problem because these haven't gone over the edges. So this one and this one is not a problem. And then my jam tart, again, I'm just going to lift it out. And obviously you'll make a tray with all the same. You won't probably do what I've done and just use up bits and pieces. Now, these need time to cool down. Even in half an hour, the jam in those jam tarts and the curd in those lemon curd tarts will be too hot to eat and you will burn your mouth. You need to leave these at least an hour until they are really cool. Can you please check with your parents or carers before you try and eat these? Now this tin, this sugar that has gone up and over the edges of this tin will make a hard crust that is very, very difficult to get off when you wash the tin. Here's my top tip. You can absolutely leave these into soak and that might start to soften the sugar a little bit. But if you run some really nice fresh hot soapy water and you put the tin in to soak in hot soapy water, and after maybe 5 or so minutes you give it a clean over, the hot water will start to dissolve the sugar, a bit like if you put a teaspoon of sugar into a cup of tea, it will dissolve. Well, the warm water will start to dissolve. Now, I'm not saying use water from the kettle, but you do need to just get the sugar to dissolve a little bit, which will then get these bits off the edges of your tin. I hope you enjoy your jam tarts or lemon curd tarts. I hope they go well for you. Like I said, my top tip to you was with the quantities I used to go with 3 tablespoons of water and possibly add the extra half a tablespoon if you need it. It was very close to 4 tablespoons being right, but just a little bit too much. And like I say, hot soapy water to get your tins cleaned afterwards. And don't fill more than a teaspoon of jam in your jam tarts, because it will overflow, and you can see I'm going to have fun cleaning this tin up now. All the very best, and I'll see you again soon.